And when the meal was ended, Jesus and his disciples made their way to the Garden of Gethsemane. And he took his 3 closest disciples and asked them to go aside with him and pray. And of course, they did what a lot of people do after a meal. They went to sleep. And Jesus cried out because he knew what was about to happen. He had already confronted Judas and sent him on his way to do what would be done. He knew that soon the soldiers would arrive and they would take him away. And the great gambit that he started on Palm Sunday, when he arrived and announced himself to be the Son of David, the Messiah, was about to hit its crescendo. And there in the garden, he prayed so hard, blood poured from his face, and he cried out to the divine. And we've all been through moments of crisis and can share a little bit in the misery of that night. We're also told in the Gospel of John that after he received comfort, he said a prayer for the rest of us, that they would see in this act the unity of the human and the divine, and that we might all be one in that Holy One. So yeah, let's talk about that night in the garden as we walk together down Creation's paths. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I am a Christopagan Druid and priest of Brigid.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christopagan Druid and sous chef to the Dagda.
And today we are going to be talking about the dark night on Gethsemane. What would, if we're talking about Jesus as the cosmic Christ, this is not only the dark night of the soul, but maybe the dark night of the cosmos. Quite a dark night with hope sprinkled in. So let's get into all this. But before we do, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever the platform is you're listening to us on. We do 5 original Christopagan and Druid episodes Monday through Friday, except during Holy Week, where we're doing a new episode from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday. So you're going to get some extra ones this week, and you don't want to miss anything. We've got a lot of stuff coming up. All right, let's just get into it, shall we?
So if we were to look at Holy Week from the lenses of the 4 paths of creation spirituality, this Garden of Gethsemane day is very much looking at all 4 paths through the Via Negativa lens. Although overall there is a more somber perspective, there is a lot of hope and humility and creation happening in this moment, and a lot of transformation happening in this moment.
This is a moment that has always resonated with me really strong because my great-grandmother, and I want to stress that again, my great-grandmother had on her wall a hologram of Jesus praying in the garden. She actually had 2 of these holographic images of Jesus. It's the one where it has a comb-like texture, and depending on which way you're looking at it, gives a 3D effect. I remember when I was a child going over to her house, and we would always make a meal and we would eat, and then we'd go over to the organ and we would sing some hymns, and then we would sit down and do Bible study, because that's how my great grandmother was. And I would be sitting there talking to her, and right over her head, I would see on either side of her these 2 different images of Jesus. One was Jesus knocking on the door, and the other was Jesus praying in the garden. And that has made these 2 images almost synonymous in my brain, even though I understand that they are different. But this is the wondrous thing that we bring to our faith journey, is how we make connections between things. Because I probably wouldn't have that connection if I hadn't grown up like that. And so to me, this is that night where Jesus starts knocking on the door. This is that night where he knows everything that he set in motion is about to come to it's either going to fizzle, or it's going to go as planned, or it's going to go far worse than planned. He has done his announcement that he is the Messiah. He has turned over the tables in the temple, taking a direct swipe at Rome. He has argued with everybody he could argue with in town.
Really kicked the hornet's nest.
Really kicked the hornet's nest. And he has, depending on your perspective, I think sent Judas to turn him in, to tell people where they were, or at least apparently knew, according to the story, that Judas was going to do that. However you want to interpret what you must do quickly, however you want to interpret that. So he knows that this is all about to go down. And in preparation for this, again, from my interpretation, that he wanted to literally sacrifice himself so the movement could survive. The apostles went out prior to this and got exactly one sword, which Jesus said would be enough.
Just one gets me every time.
You know that these swords were not intended for self-defense because there's a Roman legion coming. That's okay. We have one sword.
There's more than 12 of them there.
Yes. By the way, we actually don't know who all was there that night because the Gospel of Mark actually has someone who is not an apostle run at the beginning of the story. And in Secret Mark, we actually have a couple people run. And by the way, yes, there is a Secret Mark. We've talked about it before. Apparently, all of the early church fathers knew about it. We only have a few quotations from it. There apparently was a short version of Mark and a long version of Mark. I would love to maybe someday get to read the long version, but theoretically, that long version has not fully survived other than the quotations from it. But Clement of Alexandria actually quotes from the long version in explaining this exact scene, is like, because somebody is like confused about the person running the Mark. Oh, in the longer version, it says this. Quotes this passage again in the longer version, but I digress. So we actually don't know how many people were there that night. One sword was not meant for self-defense, but it was enough to show that one person here was a threat. Now, later tradition would put this sword in Peter's hand, and I think that this is a critique of Roman authority because Peter very quickly becomes associated with Rome. This is where he is supposedly martyred, is in Rome, and becomes synonymous with that. But the reason you would want the one sword is to show that one of the people here is a danger and the others are not. It again goes into the way that I have read this story for decades now, that this is a man very intentionally trying to say, no, I'm the dangerous one. You don't have to worry about the rest of these people. You don't have to do to them what you did to the people in Zephyrus.
This is also why I believe Judas was sent, because this is such a curated and controlled scene for when the Roman soldiers show up. Okay, we're going to have, because this way, by having him turn in Jesus, Jesus can control this whole situation much better, rather than them showing up random, like at the Mount of Olives or something, when they're not prepared. He was able to be prepared, have a weapon so that only he would be taken and the rest are unarmed. There's bystanders. And also with Judas showing up and delivering the kiss to the one person that's supposed to be detained.
Yeah.
So they don't accidentally grab the wrong person, grab Peter and be like, oh, you're Jesus, come with me. And Jesus be like, no, you got Peter, it's wrong. There's no argument.
Because the soldiers probably wouldn't know who they were actually after.
Yeah, the soldiers wouldn't know.
And Romans were good at making sure that they had the right person. They're like, everybody nails to a tree just fine.
Yeah. And if there was confusion, odds are the soldiers would have grabbed everybody in debate.
So you can imagine just the stress of this night. And there actually is a physiological thing that can happen to you that will cause you to sweat blood. Basically, you're so tense that the capillaries actually burst. So yeah, the amount of stress in this night is almost unbearable. And as somebody who has always found bad things to not be as terrible as what I put myself through in anticipation of bad things, to me, like, this night is the most horrible thing. Because yeah, I'm not trying to diminish getting whipped and the crowning of thorns and the actual crucifixion, horrible things. But imagining what is going to happen, what is going to happen next, the things that would have been racing through his mind. I know from my own point of view, like, this is the darkest night. And remember, all of this is happening before dawn, all the way up to the arrest. He's already arrested and the apostles have scattered before dawn. And we have a couple interesting things that happen here that I think disrupt the way many people think about both Jesus and his role in history. One, the famous, infamous prayer, "May this cup pass from me, for I do not want to taste its poison." This is, again, a person knowing that he is going to die, whether that is because he believed that prophecy required it, or because this is the only way the movement could potentially survive Rome. I tend to believe that the orchestrated side of this, just because there was no doctrine of a suffering Messiah until after Jesus. They went back and found other passages about other figures that were not traditionally read as messianic verses and reinterpreted them as messianic verses to be a part of this. The Messiah that was expected during the time of Jesus was one who would literally raise his hands and armies of angels would come down and lay waste to their enemies and give them the land back. So I do not believe that he went into this moment believing that he was fulfilling prophecy. I think that's backfilling reading into this. I think that he knew that he had to die because that's what Rome does to prophets.
Yeah, and also that's the lot of prophets. There's a long Judean tradition of the prophets being killed.
Yes.
Executed, and quite a few times in horrific manner. For me, I sit back and I go, yeah, I really feel that some of the other prophecies, I feel like they were just interpreted wrong. To get this fantastical, I raise my arm and all these angels come. And I look also at the temptation of Jesus when Jesus goes out into the desert, and the temptation, if you're the Messiah, you just call these angels and it'll be done. Now, that's not how it's done. I find that as reinforcement of the other prophecies just being misinterpreted.
No. Okay. So what you have to remember is there is no prophecy of a coming Messiah. There is not a prophecy in any of the books where it says, and the Messiah will come and blah, 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 blah. It is never anywhere stated like that. The prophecies of the Messiah is a constructed folk belief, okay, that is born out of two traumas and a good thing. One, the term Messiah means anyone who is anointed. So all of the kings of Israel and Judea were messiahs. And in fact, we still see in scripture that word being used for them, okay? So that word Mashiach simply means anointed one. They have gone in and they've had the oil poured on their head and they've received the ritual blessing. That's what that means. So you have the first trauma, which is the one that haunts us to this day. And we really do need to do an episode or series of episodes about how we are still coping with the trauma of the death of King Josiah, because I don't think people realize how much of their modern day faith that they either still have or were raised in is just people still not over the death of King Josiah, even if they don't know the name Josiah. Josiah was one of the last kings of Judah, and he thought that he was ordained of God to whoop everybody who he wanted to, and basically kept making threats towards Egypt, kept making threats towards Babylon, and met them on the field of battle in a place you may have heard of called Armageddon. Oh yeah, in the valley of Megiddo, which is what Armageddon means. He met them in battle in a place called Armageddon, and everyone died, including him. The entire army was slaughtered, including him, because the Babylonians and the Egyptians decided and just destroyed them, and then built a siege encampment around Jerusalem. And it was not good for anybody. Now, Josiah is the prototypical Messiah figure in that he was believed to be the one who restored the law. Remember, it's under his reign that we have the rewriting of the writing of the book of Deuteronomy and the edit and recension of the Torah reflect the ideas of the Deuteronomists, that the kings are good and there's only one temple and all of that. And he was seen as this former savior figure who was going to put everything right. Well, that didn't happen. He got too big for his britches and died with his entire army at the Battle of Armageddon. And we're still talking about this battle to this day, even if we don't know that it is a historical battle read into the future. So that's trauma number one. Trauma number two is the original thought of the Messiah. The original doctrine of the Messiah comes about during the exile in Babylon, that someone is going to save us. Somehow we're going to get out of here. Someone is going to bring us back to the land. We're going to get out of here. We're going to get out of here. And then they do. King Cyrus not only sends them back to the land, sets them free, sends them back to the land, but it helps pay for the rebuilding of the temple. This is the first time that the temple is rebuilt. I have issues here because we call it the second temple, even though Herod tore down the second temple and built a third temple there. But both of these temples get called the second temple. And he is called the Messiah in scripture because he saved the people from and brought them back from exile. So now we have this memory of a king who's going to set everything right, a king who actually set everything right. Well, then the Greeks invaded. And after the Greeks came the Romans. And so the expectation is, well, we had King Josiah who helped save us, except for that little bit at the end. A Messiah came and saved us. We had Cyrus, a king that came into power and saved us. Another king Messiah is going to come and save us. This time, once and for all. He's going to come with his angels. He's going to come with all the armies of the heavenly host. He is going to come and make everything right. He's going to kick out the Romans, and we're going to get to all of the day of the Lord prophecies that are found in the prophets. And we can see various versions of this. There's a wonderful tract that was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls called The Battle of the Sons of Light versus the Sons of Darkness. And you can see how this idea develops and grows. In this version, we have two messiahs. We have a priestly messiah and we have a kingly messiah. And one is there to restore and save the temple. And the other is there in the line of King David to restore the kingdom to its everlasting glory, because all the sons of darkness will be defeated and we will be in the last days. And so all of this folktale telling is going on, constructing an image of the Messiah. Later generations of Christians will argue that Jesus fulfilled both of these roles. The letter to the Hebrews is very much saying, no, he was that priestly Messiah and that kingly Messiah. He is our king and our high priest. We don't need kings or high priests anymore because he fulfilled both of these roles. And so these are the stories that Jesus would have grown up with and that would have been prevalent in the land. And this is the Messiah that people are expecting. Jesus, in his subversion of this idea, from the earliest teachings we have recorded of him that seem to go back to the historical Jesus, because we find them in not just in the Gospels themselves, shared amongst the Gospels themselves, but find them in exterior sources that, like the Gnostic Gospels and what have you, that seem to come from different lines of tradition. The kingdom's within. Jesus, because of the trauma of Sepphoris, which, remember, 4.5 miles down the road from where Jesus grew up, where his mother was from, and his grandparents were from, according to Josephus, we don't know what the real number was, but according to Josephus, 2,000 people were crucified. 2,000 people were crucified, and everyone else was rounded up and sold into slavery in Rome. This would have happened around the same time he was born. Okay? So imagine growing up in this trauma. His change to this is he's preaching, no, the kingdom will not come by expectation. You're not going to see a king coming on a throne, right? The kingdom is within you. The kingdom is within you. The kingdom is among you. You just don't see it. It's already here. We're living in here. He spiritualizes the idea of the kingdom. The kingdom is us taking care of each other and making that more of a reality every day through our actions. That is the kingdom that Jesus taught. But he knows that outside, that many of the people in his own community are still waiting for that king to call all the angels down to burn Rome to the ground. All of these expectations are in his head. He knows what he taught. He knows that so many of his disciples were not paying attention and were like, oh, that's great. Yes, the kingdom of heaven is within us. Until you wield aloft your mighty sword and say, by the power of Messiahhood, and call down all of the angels to destroy Rome. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So all of that is just weighing on him in this night. And this is where you get kind of the ultimate clarity. Remember, the last of the canonical gospels written was the Gospel of John, which was written probably between 90 and 100 of the Common Era. The last of the canonical gospels to be written. And the Jesus that we see there, yeah, he has a moment of doubt, but that is followed by him actually being consoled by the angels, which the other stories tell us, at which point he then prays his high priestly prayer, that we would all remember that we are one. I have kept all of those that you have given me, except for the one who must go astray, so that all might be fulfilled. But I pray that these will be one in me, as I am in you, that we may all be one. You see this reiteration, 70 years after his death? This reiteration 30 years after the temple is burned to the ground and turned into a literal trash heap. A trash heap with a temple to Jupiter on it. Yeah, the Messiah didn't come in that way of bringing fire and brimstone and armies of angels. And he knows that's not what is going to happen. That is not the gospel that he preached. Because you can see in the teachings leading up to this, him trying to change the way they're thinking about things. I tell you, not one stone will be left standing here. The Romans are going to come. They're going to destroy all of this. At no point in any of those stories does he add in, and here's where the angels come to save you.
Yeah.
That's not in any of those stories. It's pray that your flight be not at night.
Pray that you're not pregnant.
Yeah, because many will run into the mountains and pray for the stones to fall on them so that they may be saved from the great terror that is to come. He is preaching a different kind of gospel that, if this goes the wrong way, will be forgotten. And so there he is that night on the mountain, surrounded by his disciples that are sleeping rather than staying up with him, praying with him. Only the angels are there to console him. James, John, and Peter are sleeping. And this is the night before the crucifixion. This had to be the loneliest night of his life, because even those closest to him were not there. It's empowering for us to realize that this is a shared moment of pain, because I think we've all had those moments where somebody got a bad diagnosis. Maybe when you yourself got a bad diagnosis, when somebody was in a car accident, when something bad happened, when the storms were raging or the earthquake hit, that long, terrible, lonely night. When you're with and around other people, you still feel alone. And the power of the story, the power of remembering the events of Holy Week, is the terror comes that Thursday night. The horror comes that Friday. Grief and sorrow fill that Saturday. And then Sunday break. It's remembering that everything exists in a cycle of renewal. Everything has a new day. There is a new dawn. It's just whether or not you reach it, whether or not you get there. Judas doesn't reach the dawn, whether that's because he ended his own life or whether other people ended it for him. Because on which version of the death of Judas take is what actually happened, because there's two different versions, and one he did it to himself and one somebody else did it to him. But Judas doesn't make it to that date.
That's one of those other interesting things too, when you think about, the prayer in the garden, when Jesus is praying for that cup to be taken from him, and but it's by God's will, not by his. And then he accepts his fate. I found it interesting that in a way this kind of mirrors what he instructed Judas at the Last Supper to do, where Judas had to take his own cup of poison at that point in time. And Jesus said, was basically look, you must do.
What you must do quickly.
I find it interesting because so many want to villainize Judas that he had his own cup of poison he had to drink. And I think there was hope that he would survive the guilt and the trauma of what he had to do. Because I think so many forget that's in there. Once again, it's easy to villainize him as this traitor. And no, he had a hard burden too to carry, of being the one to turn Jesus over so that everyone else could be saved. And like you said, whether he ended himself or whether others had ended him, there was probably a tremendous amount of inner turmoil over all of that.
And while it is nowhere near a canonical text, I think in the next couple of weeks, we should do an episode on the Gospel of Judas, because it is a powerful critique of the church, of the very imperial church that we talk about all the time.
Yeah.
And it uses Judas as the only one who understood. It portrays Judas as, of the 12, he's the only one who understood. And even Judas gets it wrong at the end.
Yep.
Because if you read the Gospel of Judas has Jesus at the end just nope out. Jesus decides at the very end, the reason for the ascension is Jesus realizes none of you are going to get it. I'm done. Bye. And leaves and goes into the kingdom without any of the 12 and just abandons them. It is a scathing critique of the 3rd, 4th century church. And we definitely go into that, but it's so interesting to drive its point home. It makes the argument that Judas was the only one who got it. And then even he failed at the end, because whether he was sent intentionally or not, we know he doesn't make it to the resurrection. He doesn't make it to that Sunday. And that's the challenge for all of us, is to enter into these experiences and find those means of grace to make it the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day, in hopes that all things will be made right, and to do what we can in the interim to make things better until things can be made right. And that to me is really the message of this Thursday, of Jesus praying in the garden, because all he has to hold on now is hope. That's all he's got. It's not going to go wrong. Everything's going to work out for the better. This was the right decision because remember, he could have fled. And there are versions of the story that came about in the 5th, 6th century that you say that he actually fled. There are versions earlier that claim that he either escaped the crucifixion and they just killed one of the apostles in his place out of confusion. Some actually say that it was Judas that was crucified instead of him. There are a lot of stories in the first, say, 7 centuries of the Christian church that do depict him as running.
Yeah. And I find those stories really saddening because I feel like they missed the point and the focus and the lessons that can be learned from this. And instead, they just focused on the fear and made themselves sit with the fear until the fear consumed them. And then went, well, okay, now that I'm fully consumed of fear, what do you do when you're fully consumed of fear? You run. And they basically went, oh yeah, no, Jesus ran is the only answer.
And this is why the version of the crucifixion in the Quran is different. The Christianity that was prevalent in the Arabian Peninsula was Nestorian Christianity, which believed that Jesus was 100% a human. There were no divine qualities to him at all, and that he did not die on the cross.
Yeah.
These are 3 of the hallmarks of the Christianity that was prevalent in the Arabic Peninsula at the time, which is why Muhammad, the version that we get in the Quran, is different and says, no, Jesus didn't run. God performed a miracle, and they thought they arrested Jesus, and God swapped them out. Judas died on the cross, and then God returned Jesus afterwards. Because he's trying to make sense of this very different story that was present on the Arabian Peninsula at the time. So that's why there's a different version of it there. And that is a very interesting story and one we don't have time to get into right now. I just wanted to point that out because I know some people do know that story is different in the Quran, and that's why.
A deeply profound practice that I would heavily recommend everyone to not only try, but to maybe do multiple times is to use the Garden of Gethsemane, read through that story and do a deep meditation on humility. Because this story has so many juxtaposing elements to it, it will give such a deeper understanding. I found a profound understanding of what humility actually is and means, because you have a person that is 100% divine and 100% human wrestling with this burden. And of course, the first question that comes up when anybody faces a heavy burden is, does it have to be me? Maybe somebody else could do this, maybe not. And it just becomes so profound in helping to understand what humility is.
And when you do that,
all of that.
And when you do that, don't forget to bring up in your mind the 3 temptations of Jesus in the desert, because they bookend each other. Because you could see those thoughts coming back up. If you are the Son of Man, could you not just command the stones and they become bread? If you bow to me, I will give you the kingdoms of the earth. If you jump from the pinnacle of the temple, is it not written that he will send his angels to lift you up, and not even your ankle will be bruised? Yeah, lots of thoughts going on this night. And I hope that you take some time to just consider them, especially with everything going on. I feel like we have been in a kind of profound Gethsemane moment for a while. And I would love to know how especially this year, how is this resonating with you? Because we are all having a Gethsemane moment. I don't think we're quite to the crucifixion yet. I think we're close. Maybe in the trials phase, but I don't think we're quite to the crucifixion. I'd love to know what you think, though. Let us know in the comments. If you're listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, or CreationsPaths.com, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say that you can leave a comment, they don't notify us, so we won't know. So leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. And then head over to CreationsPaths.com, click on chat, and you can leave a comment there, and we will be able to get back to you and see you. I love it when people comment on these. It really brightens my day. While you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars you can pass our way, we offer monthly and annual memberships. You can also support us on Ko-fi and Patreon. I am CE Dorset on both. You can also support us through the Cash App hashtag CreationsPaths. Thank you to everybody who does that. It really means the world to me. It helps us to keep the lights on, keep roof over our head, and food on our table. If you don't have any money right now, or you're not sure that we're the kind of people you want to give your hard-earned treasure to, that's perfectly all right. But if we've ever said or done anything that's helped you out and you think would help out others, please share it with them. That helps us out more than all right. And as we're heading out this week, we are praying to the Blessed Mother Mary. Oh, Blessed Mary, who while your son was on the Mount of Olives with the disciples praying, You were in the house of Bethany, and you felt your soul being wrenched from you. And you knew what was going to happen, and that darkness came upon you, and you struggled. Help us to deal with our own dark nights of the soul when they inevitably come into our lives, and give us the strength, the courage, and the grace to not only face them, but to make it to the other side stronger and empowered. Amen.
Amen.